Hello, everybody. My name is Tony Felker. I'm President and CEO of the Frisco Chamber of Commerce, and I want to welcome everybody here to our Economic Development Day that we're doing as part of Leadership Frisco. Today is a wonderful day. We have the opportunity to discuss all sorts of economic development with our class, but we're having this opportunity right now to really talk to the forefathers, the ones who started it all, and what I like to call Mr. Frisco 1 and Mr. Frisco 2. We are privileged today to have a conversation about economic development in Frisco today and yesterday with Mr. Bob Warren and Mr. Sam Roach. And as soon as I introduce them here, I'm going to step off the camera, let the focus be on them. So without any further ado, we have a lot that we want to cover this morning. So at this point in time, I'd like to introduce Mr. Bob Warren, Mr. Sam Roach, and I'll let Mr. Bob start off first and give a couple of moments talking about his background, and then Sam with a couple of minutes, and then we'll get into discussion. Mr. Bob.
All right. Thank you, Tony. I was born in Frisco, Texas, February 1, 1921. So you can do the math and see that I just like a couple of months being 100 years old. Anyway, I grew up here, graduated from Frisco High School in 1938, went straight to Texas A&M, and just as I graduated from Texas A&M in 1942, it caused the World War II to break out. So I went to Uncle Sam, I said, I don't want to be walking around agitating the gravel. I want you to teach me how to fly. So they taught me how to fly and issued me a airplane and said, take this airplane and go across the North Atlantic and join the troop carrier squadron. Our main effort troop carrier was to deliver the airborne boys into combat, and so I spent the rest of the war doing that, plus a whole bunch of other things that we did. Carried fuel to Patton while he was trying to get across Europe and was outrunning his ground supply. So we had a lot of fun, and the Lord let me get back without any crashes and well, had one crash, but didn't get hurt. But anyway, as soon as I got back, I had to find a place to work because I already had a wife and one child. And so I went to Houston and found a job with Humble Oil and Refining Company, which became Exxon. I spent 36 years with Exxon in 8 different places, and came back to Frisco when I retired in 1981, built a house on the lot that I grew up on, and I was going to travel and play golf and all that kind of stuff, and some of the people like Sam Roach started ragging on me to get involved in Frisco politics, and so here I am.
And many years, when you say Frisco politics, time on city council, mayor that we'll talk about, and a lot of other different areas there. So
that's right.
And we could spend a lot of time just going into everything that you talked about there. But first and foremost, thanks for your service, both in the military and back here in Frisco. And we'll talk a lot more about that. Sam, minute or two on your background.
Well, I was born in Frisco, Texas, 1935. In fact, one block from where we're sitting, up on Pecan Street, Pecan and 3rd. So I could almost, if I could still hit a driver, I could hit a ball to where I was born. I've spent most of my life here. The only time that I didn't spend here was a couple of years, and I worked for LTV, where it was Chance Vought Aircraft then. And I lived in Arlington because it was closer, but it took me a couple of years to figure out that the city and I didn't mesh real well. So I wasn't used to neighbors. So we moved back to Frisco. By then I'd gotten married in 1958, accepted a job with Chance Vault, and of course I had a deferment while I was in college. Got out of college, reported to the draft board, and they said, well, that's good. We've got a call going in 2 weeks on the 17th of June. And I guess I had a funny look on my face, and they said, what's wrong? I said, well, I'm getting married on the 14th of June. And they said, well, we'll defer it a month then. We'll put you on a call list for the Army for July. So I got to LTV. By that time, was working for them, and I told my supervisor, I said, don't put me doing anything drastic because I'm about to be drafted. And he said, no, you're not. And I said, yes, I am too. They've already told me they're going to. And they said, you're in a critical industry and you're not going anywhere. Mm-hmm. So that was a big shock to me, but a good shock. So I spent 17 years with 19 years with LTV, and enjoyed that work in the aircraft business, but decided I didn't want to retire from corporate America. Pretty political, and I wanted to go do something else. After a few years, and played a little business out there, which I still run today.
That being Roach Business Park?
Pardon?
That being Roach Business Park? And,
yes, sir.
And a little bit more involvement in the community, definitely. I love the way you guys just play off those few little years that you got involved in the community, and that's really what so many people know about and what we want to talk a little bit about more. I want to apologize right up front. I know it should be Mr. Warren and Mr. Roach, but we've known each other for 20-plus years now, and it's a privilege that I can actually sit here and visit with you guys as Bob and Sam. So thank you for letting that happen. So as I said, we could talk a lot, but what we're really focusing in on for Leadership Frisco today is economic development in Frisco. Bob, most people, if you ask them when economic development really started in Frisco, they're going to talk about the mall, which opened in 2000. I think it was August 4th, 2000, that it officially opened. There was a little bit of history before that with the mall. Can you share your thoughts? And Sam, jump in whenever you want. Tell us a little bit about how that mall came here. Was it an easy process? Anything that you want to share as you were negotiating the mall coming to Frisco?
Well, it was not easy. We worked 7 years to get that mall. I remember George Purefoy, the city manager, and I going over to Louisville, where a company was building a mall over there. So we started talking to them about building a mall in Frisco. Somewhere along the line, the mall builder got they got some property. They got what do you call it? Anyway, they had option on some property in Frisco and also in Plano. So we saw that go back and forth like a ping pong ball as to who was going to get the mall, and we kept excuse me, we kept working with that developer. Lo and behold, he sold out to another developer also in Chicago. So we thought we had lost it, but turned out that we had good rapport with the new owner. And to make a long story short, the new owner and his wife came down to make a final decision. And Frisco did not have a hotel, so they had to get a hotel in Plano. And so he had been the owner, CEO, came out several times to look at the two properties, and he said, "Okay, I'm coming out one more day, and I'm going to bring my wife." And so he brought her out here, and they looked at both properties, and they headed back to the hotel. And he said, "If you were making the decision, which site would you choose for the mall?" And his wife said, "Frisco, no doubt." He said, "Why would you say that?" She said, "Well, Frisco has access to three major thoroughfares, 121, Preston Road, and the Toll Road, whereas Plano site has access to only 121 and Preston Road. Besides that, I think the site is better in Frisco." So he said, "Well, Frisco it is." And they came and told that story to George Purefoy and Frisco secretary and myself. And when the lady was standing there, and I told the city secretary, I said, "Send that lady the biggest flower arrangement that you could find." She did, and and the wife thought that was funny, and we had a good rapport, and we got them all.
And it's those little things. You were the mayor at that time, and sometimes it's those little things behind the scenes, how you reacted and how she reacted, that can make such a difference to what Frisco is now. As I mentioned, you were mayor during that time. Sam, what were your perspectives on the mall negotiation going back and forth from your perspective at that point in time?
Well, I wasn't directly involved with that, but every now and then my wife Ann and I would go to Chicago just for kicks, But every time we went, I made sure that Jerry Rosenholtz was there. That's who we were working with.
Right.
Because he started out with Homart, and then when they sold, he went with General Growth.
Right.
So that was our point of contact that, for continuity.
That's right.
So we'd go up and have dinner with him or lunch, and it was interesting because I'd just sit there and listen. And he'd quiz my wife on, well, now where do you shop? What do you look for? Why do you shop there? Why do you look for that? I mean, quizzing her on her retail
I'm picking up on the trend here. It's the ladies that are behind the big decisions here and the information there. So it's great stuff.
That's right. Yeah.
So, and I want to make note that, Bob, you said that was 7 years of negotiations, and that was right when I came into town, and I remember it bouncing north and south of 121. As we talk about economic development and things that have happened since then, I want everybody to remember that was 7 years to make that deal. A lot of deals since that time have either taken similar amount of time or much quicker. But obviously, almost 100 years before 2000, when the mall opened up, that's when Frisco really began. And that comes back to the railroad deciding to come through this part of the area as opposed to the Preston Road area. If I just talk about the railroad, what are the thoughts that come across both of your minds from an economic development perspective? What comes to mind when you think back to the railroad and its decision to come through here and create Frisco?
Well, the railroad is the reason that Frisco is here. In 1902, they decided that the railroad company decided to build a railroad from Denison to Carrollton, and it just happened to come right through this area here. The railroads, they take the low road instead of the high road, so this was ideal location for the railroad. And in order to have a railroad at that time, you had to have water for the steam engines. So they built a Frisco Lake, and and built a depot, and they decided that they would.
I think your railroad ticket is ready to go. There you go.
They decided that they would hire a company to sell land here. So they had a 2-day auction, sold lots, and they advertised it from Chicago all the way south. So they at that auction they had an open bar, and that's the first time that Frisco had open bar, and it was the last time until Stonebriar Mall opened. And
a lot of key moments there, and you referenced Frisco Lake. I wonder how many people, if you were to ask them, know that we had Frisco Lake here in town. So either one of you, Sam, you want to talk a little bit more about where that is for reference? Because I love driving down the road not far from here and thinking I'm driving down through the lake right now. And your history of the lake.
Well, it's just about a mile to the south of where we're sitting.
Exactly.
There was a creek that went through there, and so they built the lake so they'd have water for the steam engines, and that turned out to be very fortuitous for us because ultimately we wound up with the lake and that property.
Bob, you have several stories. A lot of what we're talking about here, you've actually documented in your book, Now and Then. And then the second volume of that, I was leafing through it a couple of days ago, and you talking about playing on the spillway for Frisco Lake and the different things, how much time you spent on Stewart Creek. And then ironically, you're living right behind Stewart Creek right now.
That's right. Yeah, Frisco Lake was the our recreation area here in Frisco for many years. When I was a child, we swam there, we fished, and we played on the spillway. I've ridden my bicycle up and down the spillway, and it was a great rec area, and when after the railroad did not need water anymore, when the diesels came in, they didn't need that lake, and a couple of our the Mayor Benton Staley and
Bill Christie, I think, and
Bill
maybe Dr.
Christie.
Payne.
Bill Christie.
Dr.
Bill Christie
Payne.
had an airplane, and he flew them up to Springfield, and it was on one Sunday morning, and they went and knocked on the door of the CEO of the railroad, and woke him up and told him that what their business was, that he didn't need the water anymore, so we need the land to do some economic development on, and would he let us have the land free of charge? And he said, anybody that had the guts to come up here and wake up a CEO of the railroad on Sunday morning said, I'm just going to give it to you. So he gave it.
And that's one of my favorite stories, so I'm glad you brought it up because, and Sam, I want you to touch on this a little bit. I think it gives that early sign that people in economic development in Frisco, going way back to that time, early 60s, weren't afraid to do things a little bit different. Yeah. Sam, do you have any thoughts on that in terms of, was there a creative way of thinking outside the box that was already taking place 60 years ago?
At that point in time, Frisco had already done some pretty creative things.
Mm-hmm.
Because Dr. Say died in 54 or 52, so we didn't have a doctor in town. So the townspeople got together, and I'm sure it's probably led by the mayor, I don't recall. But they gathered up, I think it's $20,000 to build a little clinic over here so that the town could attract a doctor. And they did, and built the clinic, attracted a doctor. And it turned out he had some health issues himself, and he just lasted a couple of years. And then they went out and found another doctor, and it happened to be Dr. Irwin Pink, who has a history that you could write a book on. But anyway, Pink came to town, and he wanted to see the town grow, you know. So he was involved in the acquisition of the land down here where the lake was, and I think he went to Springfield with them that day and talked the guy into this, that, and the other. He could talk anybody into anything.
I know that well. He talked me into several things myself.
So anyway, he was always trying to promote Frisco, one way or another.
Oh, yeah.
So economic development, as far as I'm concerned, actually started with the acquisition of that lake and that property down there.
That's right.
And then to follow that up, then they talked a battery company, Gould, I guess it was, wasn't it?
Gould Battery, yeah.
Gould Battery, into coming and building a plant there in the 60s.
Yep.
And so that's really how economic development started.
But actually, you mentioned the need of the town for a medical doctor. Several years there where there was no doctor here. They saw that need from a quality of life perspective, went out and found that, and then the medical industry, as it was at that time, helped bring in other businesses. And so already you're seeing that working across industries for the benefit of the town. Now, even before that, though, Sam, you had cotton was obviously king in this area, and I believe you spent a little bit of time in the cotton fields.
Cotton was everywhere.
Oh, it was.
My dad was a farmer and rancher, and I remember one year we had 400 acres of cotton, and I came to hate cotton because I had to do all the spraying on it with a turbine sprayer mounted to a Jeep, and we had a wet summer that summer. So every time I'd get through spraying the cotton, it'd rain, and Dad'd say, go do it again. Well, I sprayed some of that cotton 12 times.
Oh, my gosh.
And, you know, by all rights, I ought to be dead because I used toxaphene, DDT, chlordane, and there was one other that I don't recall. And I'd have to mix it with water and be out in a pasture in the middle of nowhere or out in a plowed field. And I'd try to find a stick somewhere to mix all that up with. If I couldn't find a stick, I just put my arm in up to the shoulder and mix it and, you know, wipe it off on my britches and go on down the road. But I didn't have a mosquito that came around me for 7 years.
The healthiest arm around, safest arm around. So cotton was a big part. Obviously, that was a big driver with the train coming through, being able to ship cotton and the major product around here. Then we come out with Frisco Lake, and that brought in, as you said, Gould batteries. And it's funny you mentioned the chemicals. And, Bob, before we got started here, you mentioned history changes. Well, how we look at different things changes for sure. Sam, your story of the cotton and the chemicals there, obviously Gould Battery coming in, then it became Exide. Obviously, the city is now in the process of cleaning up that land.
Oh, yeah.
And while the battery recycling was a major factor here for many, many decades, 160-plus employees, one of the major businesses in town, now that land is going to have an opportunity to give back to Frisco one more time in different ways. What are your thoughts? This is almost looking forward a little bit. What are your thoughts on a land that's produced so much and been good for Frisco? What do you see that as far as the future of that land and what it can continue to give to Frisco?
Well, if you'd asked me that question 15, 20 years ago, it would have been a totally different answer. But I never expected to see all the construction and all the buildings in Frisco that I see today. So there's virtually no farming that goes on anymore in Frisco. Very, very little. And I would never have expected that 20 years ago.
Bob, any thoughts on that?
Well, as far as the use for the land, we're building apartments as fast as we can. We for years and years we avoided apartments like the plague, and would not zone land for multifamily. But we see that differently now, and that land down there would probably be a good place to build some more residential, I'd say multifamily land.
It's interesting the way the city is looking for the next highest and best use, and the highest and best use 50, 60 years ago might be very different than it is today as we look at redevelopment. So I want to switch gears a little bit. One of my favorite stories about Frisco, and there's been some variations in it over the years, I think, but if I say the term pushing dirt in Frisco, and maybe add Junior Carpenter to that statement, Sam, and both of you are already smiling. Tell me what comes to mind when I throw those statements out. Sam?
The president of the chamber was Bill Spears at the time, and I've alluded to, he talked me into being chairman of a economic development committee back in the 80s sometime. I don't remember the year.
Early 80s.
But I put together a committee, and Bob was on it, and Bill was on it ex officio, and John Weinberg came to town about that time, and he worked for TU Electric as, community
relations
or something. But he knew all the TU people in Dallas who were involved in economic development. So they kind of helped us along the way and gave us some advice and direction, which was invaluable. And that really helped us. But anyway, one day we were having a meeting down here in the old chamber office, and it was just a storage building with a couple of doors and a window or two, sitting on the railroad right away. And every time a train came by, you'd have to stop your meeting because of the noise and the shaking of the building and whatnot. And we were having a meeting, just, kicking some things around, trying to think, what can we do to generate some interest in Frisco? And somebody came up with the idea of let's hire J.W. Carpenter with some of his dirt movers, probably his bulldozer, and let's put him down at the intersection of Preston and 121 in that field out there, and we'll have him push dirt from point A to point B for 8 hours. So that everybody going up and down Preston and 121 will see that and think that something's going on in Frisco. So we passed the hat, good enough money to hire J.W. for a day, and we didn't even come close. But we thought it was a hell of an idea, but it didn't work.
I keep telling people there was enough, and it did happen, and I love that story of pushing dirt in Frisco because you hear that phrase, and that's what you guys were looking to do. Once again, thinking outside the box. Bob, your thoughts on any and all of that?
Well, of course, at that time, 121 was just like a steel barrier as far as any interest from the south, Dallas, realtors and developers and so forth. They just would not look past 121. So that was a good idea. just didn't work. But soon after that, Stonebriar Mall was built, and Sam and some of the others said, "All right, we're going to have a big meeting, and we're going to talk about development." At that time, J.C. Penney had just announced that they were going to move their headquarters from up north to this area, and we tried to get them to move it to Frisco, but we just did not have the footprint that they needed, so it went across into Plano. So this big meeting at the Stonebriar Mall, which is the first time we had ever had enough room to have a meeting in the first place.
Oh, we actually had it at the country club.
The country club. Excuse me. Not the mall. It's
in
the country.
the 80s, it wasn't at the mall.
Yeah, the country club, Stonebriar Country Club, and so we had the meeting, and at that meeting, what was the president of J.C. Penney? What was his name?
If you hadn't asked me, I'd have told you.
Well, that's all right. Anyway, the president of J.C. Penney laid out the plans and showed us exactly what the plans for the Penney's headquarters was going to be. And I remember Sam saying that the developer, the fellow that writes the business section, the Dallas Morning News, did not come to the meeting.
Well, Steve Brown, we invited every newspaper that we'd ever heard of to be there. Yeah. And the Frisco paper showed up. Nobody else showed up. But J.C. Penney laid out every plan. They had the actual plans on boards as to what they were going to do. And that's the first time that they had publicly announced it. Yeah. And so after that, if I'd have gotten a call or we'd invited Steve or some other newspaper to some event, we could have invited them to a Winnie roast, and they'd have been there.
Yeah.
So once again, being smart, thinking outside the box, taking advantage of opportunities that were there, maybe in another city, but leveraging it for Frisco and thinking outside the box.
It was a good meeting. It worked well because we had kicked it off with the president of J.C. Penney, and then we had somebody from Frito-Lay. We had somebody from Stonebriar itself. We had John Anthony from Collin County Community College. I think you spoke. City manager spoke. Yeah. And we had about 10 people that spoke, and it all promoted Frisco.
Absolutely.
And we invited every banker and every real estate broker and everybody we could think of, because we knew those were going to come to a free bar. So that was another open bar that we had in Frisco.
That was the first one after the one that they had in 1902.
We had a big turnout for that, and it worked very well.
I think it's important to note that during all this time, innovative ideas. This is all before 1987 and before Frisco had 5,000 people. That was a big year. What happened in 1987, and how did that impact economic development from your perspectives, Bob?
Well, 1987 was a notorious year. Anyway, that's the year that we hired George Purefoy as our first city manager. The city had to reach a population of 5,000 in order to have a city manager rather than just a city administrator, which we'd had. So when we reached that magic number, we started recruiting, and we got George Purefoy, who's still here and has been one of the biggest blessings that Frisco could ever have. And that really set off an explosion of growth and everything else after we reached that 5,000 mark and got the Stonebriar Mall, and we got the mall, and got the country club, and we were on our way.
Sam, a big part that George brought in that was part of the mall deal as well was bringing in the TERS, or the TIF, around the mall area there. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, that was a big thing, a big blessing, and that's still in works and still working very well. And we brought all the schools included them in that, and all the land that the schools are on. So that worked very well. But I agree with Bob. Hiring George here in Frisco in '87, and we were still struggling with our economic development committee trying to get something going. Mm-hmm. And you may or may not know, but in the late '80s was a tough time, mm-hmm. land-wise and development-wise and everything else. Mm-hmm. But George helped us push the economic development into things. And about that time, the legislature passed legislation saying that under circumstances, you could have an economic development half-cent dedicated to economic development. So we checked into that, and sure enough, that kind of fit our timing. So we went out for an election, and it passed overwhelmingly.
Oh, yes.
74, 75%, mm-hmm. to create an economic development corporation and dedicate a half-cent of sales tax to that.
1991 was that?
That's 91, and that worked very well.
I believe both of you were on the first Economic Development Corporation
board. We were on the board for
mm-hmm.
8.5 years.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Now, the type of projects that they're approving today were a little bit different than the first one, I believe, that the EDC is credited for working on. What do you remember about that first project that the EDC completed?
Well, the very first one was a sidewalk down here on 5th Street with the ABC coin.
Yeah.
I think we spent the big sum of $1,200 or something. Thought we'd really done something. And I guess we had, and then when La Hacienda came in down on Preston Road, I think we did a water hydrant for them or something.
Yeah, that was second.
But anyway, we were able to begin to do things, and once we got a little funds, then we needed to find a director. So we hired a director, but it turned out he didn't work out real well. He went somewhere else and got involved in the church, and I think became a minister or something. And then we started looking for another guy. And Bob, tell them about our interview in City Hall that day.
Oh yeah, we had we were having different people come in to interview for the job of economic development director, and we had a young fellow come in, and at that time we had an office for the mayor in City Hall, and as I was sitting at my desk interviewing him, I looked up, and on the wall that was was facing me, I saw a picture that was taken from Frisco, looking at the skyline of Dallas in the distance, and I had a crazy thought, and I said, this fellow, I'll call him Skip. I've forgotten what his name was, a young whippersnapper. Anyway, I said, Skip, see that picture back there where Frisco is looking at Dallas with the longing eyes? I said, do you think if we hired you, could you turn that around where Dallas would look at Frisco? He said, I don't believe I could do that. I said, well, we don't need you. We need someone.
I was sitting in that meeting. I said, I agree with you.
Yeah, Sam thought I was crazy, and I did too. But I'll guarantee you today, you watch the headlines and how many times a week there's Frisco's in the headlines, Dallas paper.
Absolutely. So I know in the many conversations that I've had with both of you, you have some strong opinions about why Frisco has evolved the way it has. You've mentioned leadership, you've mentioned continuity, of course, the secret sauce that everybody talks about out here, partnerships. What are your thoughts on why has Frisco been as successful as it has, not just over the last 10, 20 years, but 50, 60 years? What is it that's been made Frisco stand out in the way that it has? Sam?
Well, I've traveled around the United States with my broker hat on, my real estate hat on. You talk to a lot of these people in New York or San Francisco or Timbuktu, and they say, where are you from? Well, I'm from Frisco. Well, where the hell's that? I said, well, it's on Preston Road coming out. Oh, I know where Preston Road is. Yeah. So one thing, Preston Road's a magic name in real estate. And two, we've got the toll road that comes through town. And we've got 121 that goes. So we've got major thoroughfares that go through that a lot of towns do not have. And I think that's been beneficial for us.
Good. Bob, you mentioned that for the selection of the mall being a critical factor, and obviously that was a big thing that kicked us off. Anything else that you can think of?
The mall's economic, it's an economic engine that really kicked off a lot of our development. But another thing is the citizens of Frisco. When I first got into the mayor's job, the city of Frisco and the school district were not seeing eye to eye for some reasons, and I talked to George Purefoy about that once he got here, and he and I said, okay, we need to fix that up. So we had a joint meeting with the school board and the city council, and we got our aims reconciled, and today the school district is one of the biggest reasons that people come to Frisco. But the citizens of Frisco, you mentioned, Sam, about the vote on the
EDC.
EDC, but the citizens of Frisco have always, until very recently at least, supported whatever the school or the city came up with on the bond issue or anything like that. Passed overwhelmingly. The people have been so supportive. I think that's one of the main reasons that Frisco's where it is today.
Very good.
I think Bob makes an important point there. But prior to that meeting that y'all had, and prior to George, we had about 2 mayors back before you. Mm-hmm. And the mayor and superintendent were just like that.
That's right.
And I was president of the school board, and I thought I was going to have to get a striped shirt and a whistle,
Okay.
to referee that one.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, we sort of got it working, but you all concluded it and finished it
Yeah.
the right way, but we didn't have George at the time.
That's right.
But we did make the decision school-wise that we didn't want astronomical high schools like Allen and some of the others.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted smaller high schools, even though it's going to cost a little more, so that more kids would have the opportunity to participate, whether you're in athletics or band or arts or whatever you were in, you had a better chance to participate. And from there, we've had some pretty good superintendents, and I think I hear a lot of people say that I came here because of the school.
That's right.
School system.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard a bunch of people say that.
Oh, yeah.
So that was first known as the small school model, now referred to as the student opportunity model, to your point, getting more students. Mm-hmm. So we heard a little bit early on the need for a doctor in healthcare and quality of life. That was a driving force for economic development. Good education is a driving force for economic development, bringing people in here and therefore bringing business in as well. Continuity of leadership and being on the same page. Mm-hmm. George has often been quoted as, if it's good for the school district, it's good for the city of Frisco. The access, transportation, and the infrastructure being critical points. We're about probably 5-10 minutes from wrapping things up. Do you have any, if you could give any warning to those that are following up, our future leaders, what are some things to look out for when thinking about economic development, or to keep in mind lessons from the past or lessons for the future? Sam, you have any thoughts on that?
I hadn't thought about that one, Tony. I'd say basically, and this is an old farm boy talking, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Keep it going like it is. Keep quality involved. Keep the school the best you can make it. And just don't do something stupid.
Very good. And we've talked about Collin College coming in. Now we have great partnerships with many other educational partners, including UNT. So far we're doing that. Bob, you have any thoughts as far as the future?
Well, I think partnership has been the key to a whole lot of our successes, and I would recommend that our leadership continue to partner with like school districts, the county, the toll road authorities. Those things have really partnership with those entities has really helped Frisco grow, and I would recommend that our leaders continue to be friendly. I'll say friendly with the different groups, so that we can continue to have quality growth.
Very good. And Bob, we mentioned earlier your book, Frisco Now and Then, now in its second volume, and also included in Frisco Style on a regular basis. Wanted to talk very briefly about, I think it's important also that we remember our past. And one of the reasons that we wanted to get this recorded and hear these stories, it's important to communicate the past so that people remember where we've been, how we got to where we are now, the lessons learned along the way. Tell us very quickly, the proceeds of your book there, Bob, benefit the Heritage Association of Frisco, correct? And you guys were both key in getting that going, along with Dr. Pink and many other people. Can you talk just a little bit about the Heritage Association and preserving the history of Frisco?
Well, I'll tell you that Dr. Pink was he was instrumental when the first thing, I was on the magazine board, and we were having a meeting of the magazine board at over at La Hacienda, and we looked out and we saw a bulldozer getting ready to tear a building down. One of the Lebanon, the city of Lebanon, was here before Frisco, and they were getting ready to tear down some of the historic buildings. And let's see, Sharon Weinberg and forgotten the magazine.
Linda Sutton and Sharon Weinberg.
Linda Sutton and I were having the meeting, and we said we need to do something about that. So said let's have a committee look into what we can do. We selected Dr. Pink as the chairman of that committee. And
so you turned the tables. You got him to take on a task there. So.
Yes. And he was instrumental and said, okay, the Lebanon Baptist Church, they were getting ready to have to move it to widen Preston Road. So I expect he went and talked them into giving us that building. And we talked the city into paying for the move, to move it down and to start a heritage center. He was always wanting a museum, so said, okay, the museum will be the center of this heritage village, we might call it. So we moved that building plus another residential residence from there, and one from West Frisco, and built the museum. And Dr. Pink was, of course, his wife had been involved in the museum in McKinney, so that was a big help. So that's what kicked off our heritage.
I know our current mayor is very adamant about preserving history, not only history from 100 years ago, but key moments along the way today. And I think as we continue to document that. We also have another prop up front between you, which are our scissors that we hold on to, our ceremonial scissors for ribbon cutting. And Bob, you made those. If I remember right, it says made in 1989 for the chamber. And so we just want to thank you for continuing to work with us. And I think those are symbolic of ribbon cutting and economic development that you two have been instrumental in bringing to Frisco and keep happening. So we're going to be wrapping up right now. Bob, do you have any closing thoughts in terms of economic development in general for Frisco? One thing that comes to mind that we haven't maybe talked about so far?
I don't have the other thing. Just keep on keeping on.
Keep on keeping on. Sam?
I think we're just very fortunate to have had this gentleman for so many years work on behalf of the city. And Dr. Pink, you couldn't tell Dr. Pink no. He didn't accept the word no. If he wanted something done, he said, "You're the chairman of that. Get this done."
Yeah.
There was no discussion.
Yeah, he said that we need.
He directed traffic.
So we need 3 volunteers. Well. You, and you. And that's it.
That was the origin of voluntold, right?
Yeah.
Well, I can't thank you guys enough for being able to come here with us today, talk about economic development as it is today, as it was 100 years ago, and everything in between, and everything that you two have done to be a part of it. And you two would be the first to say it's about other people. But one of the things that we know as we're talking about Leadership Frisco today it really does take a village, whether it's a village of 200 people or 5,000 people or today 200,000. It does take a village to make this happen that we have today, wherever you are in the history. And that's why we want future leaders to be a part of that, to know the history, how we got to where we are today, and so appreciate having the chance to visit with the two of you, and just cannot thank you guys enough. On behalf of us, our board, our team, everybody else out there in Frisco, we just want to thank you for all you have done, and keep on trucking, as Bob says. Just keep on going and keep on trucking. So,
And we thank you for your part in it.
so thank you very much, guys.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate it. And with that, folks, we're going to go ahead and check out for right now, but keep on trucking.
All right.